Hello, everyone. My name is Marshall Shepard, and I'll be your host today. Thank you for joining us for another Flycast Partners webinar. Today's webinar is Exposed, How Scheduled Workloads Could Compromise Security with Kevin Vliet. Kevin is the Product Evangelist and Director of Support Services for JAMS, the enterprise workload automation solution from HelpSystems. He has led more than 100 enterprise conversions to JAMS and is an expert on nuances of scheduling, on-task scheduler, SQL agent, cron, and many other business applications. Kevin has presented at numerous SQL, Microsoft, and PowerShell user group meetings on topics such as enterprise security batch processes, PowerShell automation, and hybrid cloud automation. Kevin co-authored the JAMS University Curriculum, a comprehensive training program for training IT administrators to manage large-scale cross-platform enterprise workflows. Before we get started, Kevin, let me introduce Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners is here to deliver amazing IT experience. We're founded and staffed by personnel that have met many years of experience in the IT industry. We took the best ideas from these collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in ITSM, ITAM, ITOM, ESM, and WLA using ITIL best practices. Our professional services can easily scale up or down to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. This administration and support services will enable your organization to focus on your normal day-to-day operations, saving you both time and money. Feel free to call us at 844-FLYCAST or visit our website at flycastpartners.com. We have IT experts to answer your questions live Monday through Friday during normal business hours. This is just one of our weekly webinars. We encourage you to check out our upcoming events and webinars on our website. Please feel free to research our services, tools, and our training options. We share various data sheets and white papers on subjects that may be of use to you. We also encourage you to check out our upcoming ITIL training classes coming up later this month. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A section of this WebEx, and I'll ask them on your behalf during today's presentation. Okay, Kevin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, great, thanks.
Good to go.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks, everybody, and special thanks to Flycast Partners for putting together this webinar. Again, I'm Kevin Vliet. I'm the Director of Support Services for Workload Automation at HelpSystems. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about how enterprise workload automation impacts security. So workload automation enables us to accomplish more work than we could ever do with just manual processing. The orchestrators of these workloads, however, often don't understand the authority that these jobs within these workloads have. So most conversations about cybersecurity revolve around users and their roles. But in a modern enterprise where these people are leveraging workload automation, we need to look more closely at what jobs users have access to and what potentially sensitive data those jobs connect users to. So my goal for you today is to feel comfortable talking to a CSO, CISO, or other security person in your company about the scope of workload automation. So we'll talk about some bad habits, and then we'll talk about some classic use cases where operations teams might feel compelled to make a trade-off between automation and security, compromise security to get that automation. I'll give you a quick primer on the framework we use to make sure a customer's workload automation strategy is consistent with their overall IT security policies. And then lastly, we'll show you how in our solution, JAMS, you can automate without compromise. All right, so let's get started. So it's interesting how an organization with otherwise strong security policies for its users can often overlook those same policies when it comes to automation. It's as if they're so delighted by the prospect of reducing labor that they forget these basic policies and principles. So these are some of the bad habits that creep into early attempts at job scheduling. Hey Kevin, can I use your admin login to our ERP when automating this job? Now, role sharing not only gives users more rights than they may need, it also renders logging of any kind useless. So if my coworker crashes our ERP, my username is going to be all over the event immediately preceding the event. They're going to be looking at me, not at my coworker. Elevated security credentials. So roles exist for a reason. So who are we to change those roles just to execute a job? Why have admin roles if you're just going to grant a non-admin user administrative rights? So you want to make sure that you're not giving people elevated security if they don't really need it. Open connections. So staying logged into a server in order to have ready access when a job needs to run is really unnecessary, and it's a security risk. Plain text passwords. Batch jobs, when you configure them to run, a lot of times are going to require a login step to get started. So storing those jobs in definitions and directly in the job definitions and source code exposes them to more users that really don't need to know them. So how do we securely store those credentials and ensure that we keep them safe? All right, let's talk about some use cases. So the source code of jobs is typically maintained by the developers. They need regular access to each job's source code, but we don't want them submitting those jobs to the schedule or applying any scheduling properties, especially in production. Those are separate tasks, and that's typically handled by our operations team. So what do? You can grant special rights to developers and hope that they don't commit an untested job to the schedule, kind of rolling the dice there. Or you can be the gopher and you can move the source code in and out of job definitions whenever they need it. And that's time consuming, and that's not something that you want to have to worry about. So how do we fix that? So we configure a group of users with elevated access, which is limited to just their job definitions. And additionally, you could even limit their access to that set of jobs within certain environments. So maybe you have multiple, you have a development lifecycle, development, UAT, and production. These development users could have access to those lower environments, but not necessarily production. So that also helps. The next one. So our commission calculation process includes a step that accesses a database which contains social security numbers and other personally identifiable information. Now, Mary, our third-party HR admin, runs this job ad hoc about 5 or 10 times a week. So how can we enable her to run this job without granting her admin rights? The solution with JAMS, Mary would submit the job as Mary. So she's submitting it herself. However, the job runs as a service account that we've created and configured to have those necessary privileges that Mary's account doesn't have. So this allows a non-admin to run processes that require admin rights. Now, jobs and workflows are valuable corporate assets. So they may not be private corporate databases, but they can often access private corporate databases. Their source can reveal a business's special sauce, and their execution can affect millions of critical transactions or even millions of dollars in some cases. They need as much protection as secure databases. The next one, so our accounting and development departments each have their own sets of jobs. Now, neither department needs to see the other jobs. In fact, some accounting jobs should never be scheduled or submitted ad hoc by anyone outside of the accounting department. We want to make sure that they're being run by people who know what they do and know what they're doing. Now, the solution is to create folders inside of a product like JAMS for each department and limit access to those end users by their corresponding department. So some food for thought here. So I want you guys to think about this, and if you can answer yes to any of these questions, I'd recommend revisiting the security features of your current scheduling tools and maybe consider managing security centrally with an enterprise workload automation solution like JAMS. So can anyone with access to scheduling tools create, submit, delete, edit, or abort those jobs regardless of their responsibilities? Do they have total control of the scheduling tool, even though we may not want them to? Do I know what clients can access the scheduler? Do I know who's doing what and when, and how they're leveraging the tool? Are users of scheduled jobs given different security credentials than the ones dictated by their role? So are IT team members borrowing credentials from somebody else in order to execute jobs? Another bad practice. Are jobs stored directly in the source, are logins stored directly in the source of jobs, oftentimes in plain text? Now, if subject to an audit, what can we do to prepare? So are you going to have the necessary information to show an auditor in the event that you are audited for security reasons? Again, if you answered yes to any of that, take a look at potentially centralizing your workload automation and scheduling tools with a tool like JAMS. So we'll talk a little bit about the security construct of JAMS and how we define security, and then we'll jump into the product in a few minutes and actually go through how things are set up, and we'll go through a couple of those use cases. So in JAMS, we implement kind of a tiered access. So think of JAMS as a house or maybe an office building. The first step to getting inside is going through that front door. So server access, that is the front door. You can limit and grant access to specific Active Directory users and groups that can or cannot get into that specific JAMS environment. So I mentioned developers having access to development in UAT, but not production. You could configure security different in each environment so that based on the end user's Active Directory user account that they use to get into the JAMS client, they would or would not have security clearance to certain areas of the product. So next we would move into the different objects and areas of JAMS. So looking at this image in the bottom right, you've got different things like resources, calendars, variables, folders, job definitions. Those last three are the big ones. So job definitions are where you store your source code. Folders are where we store the job definition. So that's how we orchestrate or organize everything rather. Variables are used to parse into those job definitions. Those can be secured as well. So how do we globally define access to all of these objects? Inquire access at a minimum to be able to get in and work with these types of objects. You can think of all of these as kind of the tenants in an office building. So everyone has access to their company's workspace. Think of folders like those tenants. And then next, once you have access to a specific folder, let's say Mary in the accounting department has access to her accounting folder. She can look at all of the accounting jobs, but she can't look at another department's jobs. Each job can be thought of as a personal office space or an office. All of these things have locks on them, and JAMS is the same way. So you can get very granular with security if you need to. But at the same time, you can also set security at a high level and let it trickle down. So that really helps from a management perspective, having to maintain security. You can even set it and forget it if you configure it using Active Directory groups and things of that nature. So, all right, so let's go ahead and dive into JAMS. We'll take a quick run through some of these use cases, and then we'll see if we have any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the JAMS application now. So the first thing that we'll take a look at is access control. This is where you define security. So right now I've launched the JAMS client as an administrator account. So I have full access to the system. So I can go into access control and I can define all of these security roles. So there are a couple best practices that we at HelpSystems recommend when configuring security within JAMS. So you can have different levels of access, anything from the admin role, which I'm a part of in this environment, to developers, operators, so somebody who needs submit access, like a knock would be a good example of an operator, and then inquirers. So maybe somebody just wants read-only access to see the log files of jobs or understand what's going on, but they don't need to touch anything. So as we go through, you can see all of these things defined. Configuration is like server settings, so obviously only the admins you want to have access to those. Then we look at things like folders, and we give the accounting department access to that as well. We give them inquire access. We'll talk about how they get elevated privileges in their specific folder in just a sec. So there's lots of different settings here. One last thing to note is the security. That's only the admins can define security in here, and then server access. This is that front door that I mentioned. So anyone not listed in these groups or even users defined in this list here would not have access into the front door. So that's access control. Next, we would have folder access. So again, we have lots of different folders here, and let's go ahead and have Mary. We'll pretend Mary's logging in. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click and run this, run the JAMS client as a different user. So I'll go ahead and I'll log in as Mary. Okay, so we are now in as Mary, and we'll go into the definitions folder, and let's get into the accounting folder. So Mary has access to the accounting folder. If we open up the properties and look at the security tab, you see that the accounting group, Active Directory group, has access to this folder. However, let's say Mary gets curious and wants to check out another folder or another department's users, jobs rather. You're going to see that she's going to get a validation error, and you'll see that she does not have access to this specific folder. So you can lock down the jobs, not only the job source, but the schedules on all of the jobs. Anything related to another department can be locked down to only people who need access to it. Very important. So next, so we mentioned what happens when Mary needs admin rights to a specific, to run a specific job, that HR process we mentioned. She has to run it 5 or 10 times a month, but it requires elevated permissions to run it. Rather than giving Mary admin permissions in Active Directory, where she would have access to additional things not necessarily related to that process. So how do you give Mary explicit access just to run that one admin level task and nothing else? So that's where this JAMS security comes into play. You can get very granular with the security construct. If we look at the security here, you'll see that we can define inherited security. That's being inherited from the accounting folder. You could also grant explicit access here. So this is my Active Directory account. You'll see that I have full control of this process. Mary is a part of the accounting folder, or excuse me, the accounting group, so she also has access. So let's go ahead and let's just submit this job to run this very basic job, but we'll pretend that this is something that requires admin level permissions. So there you go, entry 335 in the monitor view. This is where you can see all of your jobs running inside of JAMS. So when you, not only is the accounting department going to be running jobs, but you're also going to see other departments potentially running jobs, and you can set security so that certain users only see certain things, certain jobs. But anyway, so we'll go ahead and we'll open up this job, and here you see in the header up top, it gives you some information related to security. So again, remember that we are logged in as Mary right now. So she was the one who submitted the job. However, we're going to be executing as a service account configured specifically for the accounting jobs. So this service account only has access to run accounting related processes that may be admin related, admin rights required. But only specific people have access to leverage that credential inside of JAMS. The same way there's security defined on all of these folders and definitions, there's also a credential store where you house all of your logins directly in JAMS, and then you can lock them down with security as well. So the job actually executed, the batch process actually executed as the service account, even though Mary submitted it. So that gives a non-admin, a non-administrator administrative rights to run processes. All right, so I think that was it for the quick demonstration of JAMS. I'm just going to return to the PowerPoint now, and I think we got 1 or 2 more slides, and then we can wrap things up. Oops, let me jump ahead. Sorry about that. All right, so again, just want to reiterate, jobs and workflows are valuable corporate assets. So they may not be private corporate databases, but they can often access private corporate databases. So their source can reveal a business's special sauce, and their execution can affect millions of transactions or dollars. So they need as much protection as secure databases. You've got to keep them safe. So that's it for everything that I have. We can open the floor up now at this time. If there were any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
It doesn't look like we have any questions.
Sorry, was there a question?
I said it doesn't look like we have any questions.
Okay. All right, well, if there are no other questions, again, I just want to thank Flycast for giving us the opportunity to present these ideas. Now, whether you're struggling with native schedulers like Windows Task Scheduler, cron, or SQL Agent, or you're looking to contain the costs associated with your current scheduling solution, I encourage you to check out JAMS. It has flexible licensing for all types of sizes of business without compromising any of the enterprise requirements that I've outlined today. So again, thank you everybody for joining, and have a good day.